Hello. First of all, I want to give a special shout out to Bush Radical. He made a video titled the top 3 survival and outdoor books. What are our favorite top 3 survival and outdoor books? And I made a comment to his video, and that's when he responded and was kind and gracious enough to tag me. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Is what are the top 3 survival outdoor books that I've acquired over the course of my life is what I'd like to talk about. I'll just share, how it all kind of started about with me and my love for the outdoors. As I like to say, take it outside. Got me going, heading outside, heading outdoors into peeking into nature and viewing that sort of thing. So, not necessarily a book per se, but I have to give credit to my dad. Very young age. I guess I was probably about maybe 2.5 or 3. My sister was about a year older, about 18 months older, and she was in kindergarten. And my mom was at a PTA meeting, and so my dad, it was kind of late at night for us kids. It was dark, and it was actually raining, and my dad, for entertainment for us, set up a tent in the middle of our living room, and which I thought was really cool. That kind of started the whole thing, the ball rolling along, as it were. And what is a tent, and what do you do with a tent, and all that curiosity. Of course, it wasn't too much longer. My dad actually took his tent and put it up in the backyard, and when I saw that it was an actual tent that you could sleep in outside, I pretty much didn't want to come out of it. I wanted to live in that tent. I thought it was really cool, just a very thin wall, if you were as it were, between you and nature, between you and the sky, you and the stars at night, and you could hear the wind blowing, and just be able to smell the outdoors, even though I was just a young kid and a toddler at that. But I could smell, nature around me. I could hear, I can almost feel nature around me, and it seemed to somehow bake into me a call, maybe a call of the wild. Might Jack London's Call of the Wild might come into play, but of course I didn't read that and till years and years later. But some of the things that I did read, and my dad did read to me, again I have to give credit to my dad, were he had a set of 3 Boy Scout books, and those are put away in safekeeping, so I don't have them to show you in this video. The 3 Boy Scout books that my dad would share with me and read to me, they were actually his. Now, my dad was born in 1943, so the Boy Scout books were either late 40s or early 50s. Again, those are packed away. So, but if my memory serves me correctly, there was at least 3, and one was called Wolf. Another one was called Tiger, and I think the third one was called Bear. I don't remember if there was a 4th one or not, but those 3 I do remember really well. And his mother was a participated in the Cub Scouts as well as his dad, and but there was notations, is what I wanted to say. There was notations in the margins of the pages of different activities that my dad did, and of course, when you're a young man or a young boy, and you're reading stuff like that. What did my dad do when he was my age? And of course, he started sharing that stuff with me before I was, the age that he was. And I was like, well, can we do these things, and just full of great activities, things to do, and of course, outside. And a lot of fun. We had going over that, reading about that. At a very young age, again, I think it was an old black and white movie starring Mickey Rooney, played the part of Huckleberry Finn. And my dad saw how much I loved and enjoyed that story, so wasn't too long. I got a hold of the book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, and watching and reading about those adventures for years. I always revisited that. Seemed to also help encourage me to go outside. I don't know exactly. Probably about 3 again, 4 years of age. My dad showed me how to tie a hobo pack. That's a small blanket or large handkerchief, if you will, and you pack it full of food, goodies, whatnot, and then you tie it into on the end of a walking stick or a pole, and you carry it over your shoulder, and you have a couple of sandwiches or snacks, a couple of boxes of raisins. I liked raisins back then, and peanut butter sandwiches, peanut butter and honey sandwich, and I was good to go for an adventure in the backyard, or maybe adventure and there was a little mountain, or when my dad would take me fishing, or my grandfather would take me fishing, and or we would go together, and camp out at Lake Henshaw and spend a better part of a week, a couple of days anyways, there and catching fish and whatnot. And they had a dock that went out across the lake, and I would pretend that was my raft, like in Huckleberry Finn, and I was having an adventure, and I'd have to catch my quote-unquote supper, and so all those times, all those things were to me were great and fond memories, and like I said, help facilitate a desire to go out into the outside and take a peek into nature and to do something, to not just so much seek out an adventure, but try and learn. They told me, don't play around with matches, unsupervised. Yet at the same time, they encouraged me when they were there to supervise me. And when I say they, I mean both my dad and my grandfather, who, I would be able to, they would show me how to safely build a fire, light a fire, make a fire, and with matches, and then also with even a magnifying glass. And when I got to magnifying glass, starting a fire, I was just so amazed at how my dad was able to start one, and now that started my gears turning. Well, how many other ways can you start a fire? And my dad was very knowledgeable about Native Americans, and took the time to share some of those things with me, and my grandfather, I'd ask him questions, and he actually grew up in South Dakota, and he had friends of his that were of the Sioux tribe, and he would share various of his experiences, and then my dad would share some of those things he learned from his father, and you know, his own personal experiences as well, and that just, you know, kind of kept feeding, you know, that desire, you know, get outside, you know, get busy doing something, you know, back to nature, you know, all that just really interested me. So I'm going to kind of do this in reverse order, as you know, I guess tied for number 3 were the scouting books, and then adventure books, you know, like I mentioned the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and led me to believe, well, you know, or led me to think, you know, what else is out there, you know, and I guess I got a couple of years later, I don't remember now, but I was probably maybe 5 or 6, and I remember one evening, well, after a drive in the afternoon, with my dad, my mom, my sister, we went out, go out for drives on Sundays afternoons, and we'd come home at night, and we turned on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and Marlin Perkins, something like that. His name escapes me right now, but he hosted the show, and the show would be about, again, wildlife, you know, and they would show all kinds of things across various continents of wildlife, and again, you know, it kind of fueled that fire to go outside, and then after that, like I said, I was probably about 5 or 6. They had a Disney's A Wonderful World of Disney, and they had a mini-series about the life of Davy Crockett, starring what's the name, Clem? Fess Parker. Forrest. I got Forrest on the brain, but Fess Parker, and watched that, and you know, this is you know, really interesting, and of course I found out that Huckleberry Finn was a fictional character. Davy Crockett was a real life, you know, person, and I wanted to find out more about him, and in reading you know, encyclopedia and other books about Davy Crockett, I started wondering, you know, who else is out there, and that actually, you know, had wilderness experiences, you know, and I started reading about people like Kit Carson, who was one of the earlier pioneers, you know, that came west of the Mississippi, but before him, there was the Lewis and Clark expedition, and how they were set out to forge maps and gather information, you know, west of the Mississippi, and they were the first ones to actually go and travel through the Louisiana Purchase all the way to the Pacific coast. And so reading about them and you know, their outdoors experiences, you know, also fueled a certain craving, you know, for seeing things that were outside in a different way. and getting into more of exploring and just as much as wanting to do things like build a shelter or build a raft or build a fire, whatever. There was that exploration there. And then of course that was kind of fostered by both my dad and my grandfather. He had been my great-grandmother, who was Norwegian. And she would, they all three would tell me things about Viking sagas and how the Vikings sailed and traveled all over the world, and what type of things that, did they have with them, and how did they, quote unquote, survive, or how did they, weather the storms or the, changes in climate and all that, thing was very, I found very, very curious. And another one that kind of sticks out in my mind is along the lines of American frontiersmen was Jedediah Smith. Growing up in San Bernardino as a kid, I had learned that he had come to that area, and I think he was about 27 when he came to the San Bernardino, California area. One of the things that fascinated me the most about Jedediah Smith is that he was the first person to be recorded as having survived an attack by a grizzly bear. And I guess the attack was so severe that the grizzly bear grabbed him by the head and ripped away part of his scalp, and his friends and his party left him for dead. They were running for their lives. They figured that when they saw him being grabbed and literally munched on by a grizzly bear, they pretty much wrote him off for dead and didn't think he would survive. But by the grace of God, he was a Christian. He did survive, and it's quite an ordeal. I'm not going to share too much of it now. You might want to research that and for yourselves, but it's a fascinating story, and it kind of set within me. And again, I was fairly young reading about this. I would say probably preteen anyways, 10, 11 years old. And that there was more to survival than just learning how to do something or getting out outside and doing things. That's what I thought initially. Then I thought, after reading that story, you have to have a certain amount of mental fortitude and a strong mindset to get through tough situations or get through unforeseen hardships that come your way, and not giving up, not quitting, and hanging in there, persevering. So with that in mind, what are my three favorite or top three survival and outdoors books? I would say again, the Scout books are right up there. Anything that has to do with adventure, real life adventurers are even better. I would say that would be number 2. And I happen to have as number 2 my David Crockett. It's an actual diary compiled by the writings of David Crockett. I think this was printed in 1903. And there's a preface. Let's see, it says copyright 1903 by H.A. and I can't read the print there, Brainerd. And if anybody's interested, you might be able to find another copy. They're very, very rare. Maybe a reprint. This is an original. But, you know, talking about mindset here, and this is going to lead on to what is my number one. But I thought this was pretty interesting about Davy Crockett. Everything about Davy Crockett, I should say, is interesting. But I'm going to read you just a brief thing here. It's found on page 250. Davy is speaking about himself. He said, "I would not be compelled to bow down to the idol for a seat in Congress during life. I have never known what it was to sacrifice my own judgment to gratify any party, and I have no doubt of the time being close at hand when I will be rewarded for letting my tongue speak what my heart thinks. I have suffered myself to be politically sacrificed to save my country from ruin and disgrace, and if I am never again elected, I will have the gratification to know that I have done my duty. Thus much I say in relation to the manner in which my downfall was effected, and in laying it before the public, I take the responsibility. I may add, in the words of the man in the play, Crockett's occupation's gone." So Davy Crockett, of course, was a legend in his own time. They actually had a play that they did about him. Many songs, many ballads were written about him. And he was both a frontiersman, an explorer in his own right, a survivalist in his own right, and certainly an outdoorsman, somebody who lived outside and loved to do everything, you know, under the sun and the moon that had to do with nature, and was very successful at it. So much so that, like I said, there was many legends that were developed about him. But this is real life. You know, gives you an insight as to who he was and how he thought, and the mindset that he had was he was who he was, he believed what he believed, right was right, and he wasn't willing to compromise. And I think that type of a moral fiber and moral character is pertinent to truly being a survivor outside as much as inside, and you know, to be a true man, and not a man of the world, but a man, a godly man, a righteous man, and one who is able to be a leader. And of course, Davy Crockett was a statesman. For a time, he was elected, and but when he wouldn't listen, Congress would not listen to him. He resigned, and in a short time later, he made his way to the Alamo. And as they say, the rest is history. Let us not forget the Alamo. So that's probably my number 2 favorite book, The Diary of Davy Crockett. And with that, and it's going to seem kind of odd because I'm going to be switching gears here a little bit. But I picked this book up on, I'm not even sure when. I've read a lot of survival books and how-to books and different things like that, and I got this one for the kids, and it's called The Elite Forces Wilderness Survival Guide. And I like the fact that it's easy to locate and find things. It has diagrams, pictures, and whatnot, which is great for, you know, the kids growing up. They can look at you know, various pictures, you know, dealing with you know, shelters and fire making and whatnot, and tying knots, and it was just kind of a good all around book that was easy to find, and information, locate information in and refresh their memory, and then springboard them to head outside. And we have a lot of fun memories in doing that. We're still doing that to this day. Even though I'm disabled, physically challenged, I still make it a point to get outside and do something and with the kids, and doing that, able to relive a lot of experiences, that I've had from my early childhood, and pass that on to them, and maybe come up with newer ideas. You never seem to run out of, especially being disabled. There's a lot of things I couldn't do the way I used to be able to do them, and so now I got to be even more creative in saying, well, let's do things this way. And so those challenges are a fun part of life, and I've always enjoyed, and I think that's part of all part of being outside, being involved in the outdoors, being close to nature. You're always challenged. If you're not challenged by the climate and various climates that you find yourself in, and weather conditions, just nature itself, you're missing out. And I think sometimes people traps off into the outdoors and without a whole lot of respect, and they get into trouble that way. And nature is a beautiful thing, but we need to have a reverence and respect for nature, because if we don't, we could get hurt. And number one on the list is my Kjv Bible. And for some of you, you might wonder, well, what does that have to do with survival in the outdoors? But really, Genesis chapter 1 starts with the outdoors. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it goes on to explain the fullness thereof. So, then you read Psalms, 23, the Lord is my shepherd. He leadeth me beside, still waters and green pastures. He restoreth my soul. And then Psalm 1 even says, that we are to be like a tree planted by, still waters, and do not sit in the counsel of the ungodly. And then there's one of my favorite verses. It says, be still and know that I am God. And of course, when you're out in nature all by yourself, there is a stillness that can be both heard and felt. And reflecting in times of that stillness upon the things of God has a way of revealing God in a very personal way, where He's not distant, as sometimes a lot of ministers or a lot of people claim or present that He is, because He's not that. He's a very personal God. When Christ was born, His name is Emmanuel, which means God is with us. And the promise of our Lord and Savior is that He would never leave us, never forsake us, but He would always be with us, leading us to those green pastures and those still waters. And the imagery that is found within the Bible, has always spoke to my heart and helped feed that. I think there's another verse, I'm going to misquote it, but basically the gist of it is all of creation testifies of the Lord, the how marvelous are His handiwork. So I don't care if it's you're looking at a flower up close, or a butterfly, like a monarch butterfly. And there's many different butterflies that are out there, full of many different colors, and certainly the birds that sing and chirp and dance and run around, but all forms of wildlife, and all forms of creeping things and creatures that we find in nature as we're outdoors. They all testify of how great and magnificent he is. You just think of the color spectrum when you're outside looking around. A painter's palette can never compare to the creator's palette. They're going to be limited in the colors that they use, but the Lord isn't. You can even go down below the ocean, where we can't even see fish on the surface looking down into the ocean. But if you can scuba dive and you can go around the coral reefs and stuff, look at all the different colors that the Lord put into every aspect of His creation. Only God would do that. People would say, well, nobody can see that underneath there. Why am I going to waste my time in painting something underneath where nobody can see it? But that's just how marvelous our God is. So number one is the Bible. Number two would be the Elite Forces Wilderness Survival Guide, and Davy Crockett, who really lived and really existed, along with stories like Jedediah Smith and Kit Carson and many other books of that nature. And then number three would have to be, nevertheless, no less dear to my heart, would be my dad's Cub Scout books that he shared with me, and along with various stories and experiences that he had, my grandfather had. So I know this has been kind of a long-winded video, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of a chance to not only hearing from me what my three favorite books are for survival in the outdoors, but also get a little bit of an insight as to who I am. So this has been a real blessing. Again, I want to say thank you to Radical Bushcraft. Is that his name?
Bush Radical.
Bush Radical. I have a dyslexia problem, and we'll talk about that maybe sometime. But Bush Radical, thank you very much for tagging me, and I hope this has been maybe help inspire some ideas for somebody else to consider. And I think I'll tag a couple of people that I can think of off the top of my head, and that would be a really big monkey. He has a very interesting channel. He's very creative and never seems to come up with fresh ideas for camping outdoors, ultralight camping with maybe a hint of glamour camping at that. He's got, you just have to go to his channel and check him out, so please do. Another one is MT Woods Runner, and just found out about his channel recently, and just fantastic. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, and this guy is in his young years is still an avid outdoorsman, and always going outside, and just really interesting to not only watch and see what he does, but a true gentleman, just great inspiration, and I love to listen to him and learn how he thinks. and you'll learn something, I guarantee you, from both those channels. And another one of my favorite, and I could say the same thing about him and his wife, and that is, I hope I get it right. If I don't, please check the section below, because I'll have a link to each one of them. But I believe it's Northern Bushcraft.
Far North Survival.
Far North Bushcraft, or Far North Survival, something to that effect. But he's really good too. You'll enjoy his channel. So I'd like to tag all three of them in this video, and that would be top 3 survival and outdoor books that they've accumulated, not just, you know, as an adult, but maybe stretching back to their younger years like I did. So with that in mind, thank you very much to Radical Bushcraft. Bush Radical. I'll get your name right. I just found out about your channel not too long ago, just a couple of days ago. And I want to say thank you so much for challenging me with this, sharing your video, which inspired a lot of these thoughts. And you know, feel free to leave your comments in the section below. Let me know what you thought of my picks, and hope that you all subscribe to our channel. And we're a young channel, and we appreciate all of you who have subscribed already, and we feel very honored by you, because I'm nervous in front of the camera, as you can see, and I'm more of a kind of a doer type of a guy, and not so much of a talker when it comes to you know, things of this nature. So I do appreciate your encouragement and your support. And with that, I'll say take care, stay well, God bless, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.